you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
We're live now.
You see me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
We're live now.
You see me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
We're live now. Hey, Dr. Opara.
Hey, Dr. Isom, how are you?
I'm good. I love starting with these tunes because that literally is a part of what we're going to be talking about today. Uh,
Absolutely.
how I care for myself typically involves car dancing.
True
Like
story.
the whole performance, and this is a part of my core playlist. So,
100%. 100%.
mhm.
Absolutely. And good evening to everyone out there on YouTube and beyond.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. Thanks
So,
for
Dr.
coming back.
Isom,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say you can access the commentary and of our viewers and all that good stuff.
Yes, yes, I have it up on the screen. So for people who are on the YouTube, if you are typing things into the chat, such as comments or questions, we'll be able to see it and we'll be looking at it throughout. And my phone is currently with in the possession of my toddler. So if you have anything to say from social media, the best person to DM would actually be Dr. Opara because I don't own a phone at this time. Let me stop sharing. Um, so yeah,
I can relate to that 100%. So let me, since I've got my matching orders, let me make sure my phone is charged and
hmm
ready for work.
hmm And while you're doing that, I'll start off by just saying who I am for folks who are watching for the first time. So I'm Jessica Isom. I'm a community psychiatrist currently working in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and wearing a number of other hats in the medical space, medical education space, and beyond through my consulting company, Vision for Equity LLC. But most of the work I do is around, really helping people to fully see Black people for who we are in our full humanity. And beyond that, really anyone who's subject to racial minoritization and all the consequences that come from that. And I'll also say my current mood is exhibited on my hoodie, one of my favorite hoodies. It says "Nah, Rosa Parks," and that's where I am situated this weekend. And I'll talk more about why that is the case. And also, I mean, this is my mood probably since birth, if I'm being honest. So, Dr. Opar, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, how are you, everyone? So my name is Dr. Ijeoma Nodim Opara. Ijeoma means safe journey. Nodim means let us stay. And Opara is a title given to the firstborn son in an Igbo Nigerian family. And the other title I wear, which is not my name, is just my title as the first daughter in an Igbo family, is Ada. So I like to say I'm Ada and Opara. I'm the firstborn son and daughter. So that tells you everything you need to know.
It does.
And
It does.
so I'm a recovering perfectionist, a currently hey, hello, that's another part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Chief visionary and chief transformer of my own sort of, I guess you say, business, LLC. And and I'm the director of Health Equity and Justice in Medicine, which is an initiative out of Wayne State University School of Medicine. I'm also mom of three natural forces of divinity, and you will hear their voices and sounds from time to time.
Right.
And I might need to do a Black Mama moment and unmute and put my camera on to remind people of mama's downstairs, doing something important that requires toning it down. That might be happening in a few seconds, but that's my background. I'm a internal medicine and pediatric double board certified physician and fighter for all things equity, justice, anti-oppression, while building a new world where Black people and people of African descent are thriving and are flourishing and are glorious. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm also proud to call myself friend and sister to this amazing lady, Dr. Jessica Isom, and I'm so honored to share space with her and you all this evening.
I concur. Because honestly, it's sort of like I had like So listen, let me turn off Siri. Siri is being a right now on my computer. I had to pencil this in and it worked out very well. And it's like I was really looking forward to it after the weekend I had, which is a weekend that will repeat itself in the future because the conversation is never like a one off when it comes to this topic. It's like a repetitive thing that we should be returning to. And one of the ways that me and Dr. Opara have connected uh, around is the ways that this kind of trauma shows up in the work that we do, specifically in the context of medicine. But that work really is similar no matter where you sit. And often on social media, people will say, or talk about having had similar experiences. For anyone that's wondering where the title comes from for the YouTube Live, it comes from a Medium article that was written almost a year ago at this point, which for me, actually, I think, and we'll talk about this term later, was a form of soul care, more of a collective effort to navigate these experiences. In that it was a moment of being vulnerable and transparent about exactly where I was situated last year, in hopes of connecting with others around the same experience. So for anyone that's interested in hearing more about the title, you can just Google and you'll find the article, and we'll also post it in the recording after we're done. The article basically talks about a very specific experience where a racial trigger occurred in a space with colleagues. Just goes to show that there's not really a safe space in this kind of work. And the story follows with some recommendations on how to make those spaces more trauma informed. So what can we do? What's possible? So with that, I kind of want to transition to maybe Dr. Opar. You want to give a recap of what we talked about last time in part one. It was like 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I think the best recommendation is for people to watch it. But how would you describe the first time that we convene together underneath this umbrella of when anti-racism becomes trauma?
Yeah, I think if I was to break it down, I think we did. I'll break it down to three buckets. I think the first thing was for us to just really much name that anti-racist work can be traumatic. And then how does that show up, right? How does that show up in our bodies? How does that show up in the spaces? But I would say, first of all, how does it show up in the spaces that we occupy while doing this work? What are some of the behaviors? What are some of the events and activities that take place, right? That then give birth to these traumatic experiences. So that was the first thing, was just naming them and naming these pieces and sort of normalizing that this happened. It doesn't make one crazy. It does, you're not alone. We are not alone. This is an expected response to these systems that then show up when we're doing anti-racism, when these systems feel that they're being under threat. So I think that was the first thing. Then we talked about then how does it show up in our bodies? What are some of the things that we do in response? What are some of those, in other words, trauma responses to coping with these behavior? So we talked about flight and fright and freeze and fawn. We talked about how it shows up in our bodies. Like for me, I talked about my GI issues that even was coming up prior to our conversation. It came up today, but I timed it better so that I was on 10. So so we talked about how it shows up in our bodies. We talked about the shaking, the tremors, diarrhea, constipation, whatever. What we physicians will call psychosomatic, right? Manifestations of the trauma. And then the third part is we then talked about what are some of the things that we can begin to do in order to take care of ourselves. And we're going to delve deeper into that. As we talked about creating our villages, right? Beyond some of the individual behaviors or action steps that we can take, that we can begin to create those villages of support, leaning into historical communal practices that our mothers and our mothers before them used to not used to work and used to and continue to do, to take care of each other, and also borrowing from more sort of present day practices in order to lean into that community-based care. And we lifted up some resources online that also provide those tools. And so for those, like I said, we certainly turn on the video, review it while you're cleaning, while you're resting, while you're doing your charts, while you're multitasking, and just have it in your background, or not, or just sit still and meditate while listening to our voices. Absolutely. Also, if you follow us on Twitter, we posted many of the sort of highlights and resources that we discussed. So those are the three buckets. I'll put them in, Dr. Isom, and hopefully that's a good enough recap.
No, you captured it. You captured it. It was a good time. It was an emotional time. I still remember the point that you read it in the beginning of it, and my dad actually watched it. Was sending me messages about the poem and how it touched him and resonated with his experience. Just going to show that like another generation can resonate with what we talked about just as much as we can, which is also tragic, and that not much has changed, right? We're still navigating a lot of the same dynamics.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. I gave a rendition of one of my poems, which is now published in the Lagniappe Tulane School of Medicine's magazine, and I can repost that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And but yeah, absolutely. And again, that's some of the things we'll talk about when it comes to personal and soul care in combating the trauma that comes with this work. Poetry.
Right. Right. Thank you. That's definitely on the list. And I don't know. I think it would be helpful to situate our comments within real life scenarios. And I definitely have something that I could share as far as like an experience that was actually kind of reassuring for me as far as like where I feel I'm at in my journey of being able to navigate race-based stress, at least like consciously feel that way. I might feel a bit differently in a few days when it hits me, but I do have a narrative that talks about not the anticipation of race-based stress, what kind of preparation I engaged in, and then what the recovery has looked like after. We can start there. And one of the I want people to know is that me and Dr. Opar are having this conversation not as people who figured 100% of everything out, but who are being vulnerable and transparent about our journey to trying to figure it out. That is the objective. So you're not going to hear me say I did yoga as a part of my recovery. It's not going to be, I climbed to a mountain and talked to the gods. It's what I actually did, right? But for me, as a person who's engaged in advocacy work, which actually is a part of addressing experiences of race-based trauma, is committing yourself to doing something about it. But that can't really happen until you've actually some of the other stuff, which is take care of yourself and engage in community building. But one of the things that I do, I know Dr. Opar does as well, is engage in advocacy within racist institutions. There's no other way to describe it. That's what they are. Any other language is a euphemism, and we're not going to do euphemisms tonight. So advocacy within racist institutions. So what that means is that in these bodies, often we're carrying the load of not only calling out what needs to change, but also telling people what the solutions are, right? It's just really standing up, looking at power, and hoping that you don't get I don't even know what the word is, hoping that the violence that you do receive in response to that advocacy is minimal. I don't want to say no violence because that would be unrealistic. And violence in a number of different forms. Violence in the form of closing you out from opportunities, violence in the form of name calling, or questioning your character, or questioning your merit. So for me, this weekend, I was preparing for a presentation of action papers within an organization I'm a part of. Kindly, I will not name the organization, but it's a part of organized psychiatry. And I was writing action papers about whiteness and its relationship to addressing structural racism, because often in these institutions, we can't even talk about whiteness, right? So we have to talk about other things. So I was trying to like put whiteness on the table and have a conversation about that. I noticed distinctly that the people that are usually very vocal and present were kind of quiet. Like kind of quiet. So like the allies that I had built over the past, 4 years were not as vocal. So this was very much, and one of the tweets I referenced, being a goose without a flock, mostly me. As an early career psychiatrist who's only been out of residency for 2 years, facing an institution that's been in existence for 177. So
Mm,
I knew going into it, I wouldn't have that support. So I get there, I do the thing with my partner, who's a Black woman physician who's senior, and it actually feels pretty good because of preparation.
mm,
So I can name, I can kind of anticipate what would come up, and I anticipated that it would be a lecture. This speaks to the labor aspect of this. I wasn't there speaking about my opinion on an issue. I was developing racial literacy at the same time that I was advocating, and the
mhm.
amount of labor that goes into that is crazy. I did it for an hour. And I just want to call to attention one comment from this conversation, because I think this was like the one comment that was the most racially triggering, at least potentially. And this is a comment from a colleague, and this comment was not about really anything of substance, but I'll just read the comment. So, in response to the papers I offered, this person submitted anonymously this, and I quote, "Yet another paper about racism. This paper is useless and potentially harmful. It doesn't address what's already being done about structural racism in the organization. The language used in the paper is divisive and derogatory," end quote. And my job was to respond to this comment submitted by this anonymous colleague during this meeting. So I will pause and ask Dr. Opara, who's seen, I think, the papers, or at least seen my work. How would you respond to this comment? And like, what kind of reactions do you think you would have had in this moment?
Mm. Well, girl, I come from a different place. My response is ancestral, which is that I don't have to respond to a goddamn thing. I think even being held to the position of responding to
Right.
that errant ignorance in and of itself is violence.
Yeah.
I don't have to respond to errant wanton ignorance. It is not worthy. So I guess I was, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
approach it from an angle. I did a live today on IG and Facebook. I was more expressive or expansive on Facebook than IG. So I'm going to load the FB live video on IG.
Okay.
And because I was really activated to do some reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have a wonderful mentee. I mean, she's my colleague now. She's doing great things in the world. And she shared a story on her page where she was sharing about her encounter. She's an OBGYN and she's trying to get an appointment. It sounds like a primary care, but another doctor's appointment for her patient. It's very tough. She's going back and forth with the person on the other line. There's some insurance issue that seems to just be such an incredible barrier to making this appointment. And finally, she's just like, look, how can you help me help this patient? And it was almost like a magical button she pushed, and finally the person acquiesced to making the appointment for her. And she was working with a student by her who says, man, doc, how did you push through that fake barrier of entry? And I reflected on that, responded that, like, wow, that's an astute student, because that barrier of entry is totally fake in the sense that it is invented. It's not truly like real. It is something that folks make up in order to, again, maintain ultimately a system of profit and power by continuously excluding minoritized, marginalized, and poor folk, period, point blank. All right. And this is the healthcare game that is played inside of white supremacy, inside of capitalism, particularly, and how those, of course, intersect. And she was really, really vibing with that response. And then asked me, well, but how do we, convince those who don't agree and don't see that way? And I had to tell her, sis, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask that question to, because that is not my audience. I think that we need to be in a position of power, of declaring our boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
who we're going to give our energy to or not. If
Right.
you are going to be so basic that you disagree on very basic perfunctory like terms and things that I think have been long settled centuries ago, and you're just late to the party and you don't recognize that you're late, and you just really need to go in the corner somewhere and update yourself with what has happened so far so that you can then join the rest of us and get up to speed with where we're at now, then I'm sorry, I'm not the one to help you. There is someone, I'm sure, that will help you, can help you, but that will not be me. So I'm using that to sort of address your situation, sis. You know, my approach, I'm not saying it's the right one or the one, but you asked me what I would do. And I will do is to send a kind statement to whoever requested for me to respond, to say, Hunty, that's not my level. It's not upon to me to respond. This person clearly is missing a lot of like basic information. The way I said, I kind of almost put it almost like a class. You know how certain classes they're like, to 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 succeed in this class, this is like, I don't know, America 503 PhD level, right? Well, you need to actually have passed some prerequisites. It requires some prerequisite. You need to have done master's level America 403, bachelor's level America 303, high school America 203, and elementary America 103, right? In order to get to my class 503. So if you haven't gone through all those basic training, I'm sorry, you will not succeed in this class. This is not the class for you. You need to go back and get competent and literate on these basic foundational skills and knowledge and understanding and attitudes so that you can be successful at this level. That individual clearly hadn't passed elementary. In fact, it sounds like not even pre-K, 003.
Just emotions, just feelings, just feelings. That's it.
Just feelings. So I don't know that I will be giving my energy thus. I don't know, sis, if you had that option, but sometimes I create my own options.
Well, look, this is a kind of context where, you know, this is interesting. I mean, me and my colleague did what we did. We did what we do. There was no like, we were not fawning. I mean, you know, for example, calling out white power structures in this meeting. And if you don't know what that is, like you're just saying, go Google it, right? Go learn about that. But so there was definitely created space for us to advocate in the way that we intended to. At the same time, the constraints of the space is that you have to prove the merit of your suggestion. And in this institution, inherently, you're speaking to people who lack the racial literacy, also have lots of racial animosity in ways that are conscious and unconscious, and you're expected to the confines of that structure. So if I was advocating for switching lunch from 12:30 to 1, no big deal. Let's argue the merits of switching lunch from 12:30 to 1. But arguing for the merits of recognizing my humanity, like, this is a recipe for you know?
So I think that we need to have the confidence to call that out, that, wait a minute, I want us to back up a bit. Before we even talk about the content of this feedback, let's talk about the dynamics that underpin the feedback. I want to reject the very dynamics, the very dynamics that underpin the feedback. So my understanding is that this individual wants me to justify, like you said, my own humanity or the humanity of people who are Black and brown in order to warrant their approval. I would like to push back and respectfully say no. So I will not be doing that. And I would recommend the individual to familiarize themselves with these resources, and then we can revisit this topic. I submit that they will find themselves at a different frame of mind to then have a constructive conversation. But this person, you know, needs to, like, in other words, my response, and I think we need to empower each other, equip each other. I hate that word empower, loaded, but equip each other to have the wherewithal to question the structures that underpin actions, to not just, because it comes down to, I know, sis, you're about to read Toni, Auntie Toni Morrison's, whole piece about the distraction of white supremacy. But that is exactly what it is. All these behaviors ultimately they just are a distraction from what is the underpinning like subject matter. And so one of the ways that I don't get as question, I think it was, I go straight to the heart of the matter. You come left, I tell you, I still bring it back to white supremacy. I keep doing it over and over and over again. So you can't say nothing but repeat it yourself.
No, I'm with you. And that honestly, that's a part of why I felt that there is growth, because I said lots of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't remember everything I said. I did refer him to this person. I don't know their gender. I
Yeah.
didn't refer them to a lecture I had just done for the very same organization. And the title of the lecture, their self-paced module, which I would happily email this person, was how racial socialization perpetuates racial inequities. Literally, this person's comment captured the very problem that module is talking about, because their socialization is producing the resistance to something that was a very high quality submission, underlined, if I say so myself. They couldn't even consume it because of their socialization, which breeds ignorance, which breeds hostility, which breeds arrogance in that racial ignorance. And it's a recipe for disaster. And another aspect of this meeting that was another racial trigger, repeatedly we received comments about, why aren't we grateful? Like, why aren't we grateful for all the work the organization has been doing thus far? Where's the gratitude? and and it's sort of like, to ask for something to improve, the first step is to be grateful that 10% of what should be done in ways that recognize your humanity, not mine. Like, your efforts to address racial injustice increases your humanity, not mine directly. You're first, right? That I should be grateful for that. So those are two things that stood out to me from the meeting. Yet there was an expectation that we again argue for the merit of the paper while being, assaulted by some of that language. So I did definitely felt like I had soul care in this space, which we'll talk about as a component of preparing ourselves for this, because there were people in this space who were with me in advocating, but definitely after the space and before the space, that was an important part of preparing and then recovering for me as well. And I do want to read the quote from Toni Morrison, um, which captures a lot of things very well. And what she offers is this quote: the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdom, so you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. And end quote. For me, it's like, one of the things I think that will take time to figure out, that we'll get better at, is figuring out how to stop paying attention to the distractions. And a part of what you were offering, or a large part of it, was how do we navigate these moments where they're erecting things that are supposed to distract us and stay focused on our objective in that moment. And a part of that is managing how we are triggered, not trying to be triggered, but managing how we're triggered and what our response to it is. Because that in and of itself is a distraction, in a very normal way. We should be distracted by something that is causing our body to have a very threat-based response. You're on mute, Dr. Opara.
I'm sorry. Part of it is giving ourselves permission to pause. I think sometimes when we find ourselves in the headlights, right? Like, when I think of the fawning response to trauma, is that sense of, in my mind, I think of a literal fawn, the animal, and being caught in headlights, and you're just
right.
And there's almost this sense that I need to respond, I need to say something, I need to do something. And I reject that. I've learned to reject that and to say, I don't.
Can I say that what you just
Yes.
offered is something that the collective we in my space, so like the mental health professional space, that is like the most like psychologically informed thing you could possibly do, is to pause, take a moment, make them wait, and give yourself time that you need to formulate your response. So that's beautiful.
100%. 100%. And especially for those of us in academia and scholarship, where you're always in the sense of like trying to prove. First of all, I reject that, because I come into the space worthy. I
Right.
come into my spaces worthy. And I will do or not do something to make to for people to validate. There is so much, I think, assumption and just on, like you said, we need to prepare ourselves before coming into this space and name these cultures. Tema Okun's cultures of white supremacy cultures, which was changed to dominant cultures. It's all the same thing, but it's being very clear, like, how does whiteness operate in these spaces, so I can already start rejecting the dynamics even before I come into that space. So I'm going to come into this space already relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm. Or juice for those who are in
Or
recovery.
juice for those who don't imbibe,
Right.
and be clear, like, okay, these are the ways that whiteness shows up, and I need to be clear within myself. And that's why our conversation is so important, that doing that healing work every day, so that we come into this space already, not just rejecting white supremacy and the ways that we've often internalized it, and the lies it's told about ourselves, where we're always in a space of being made to feel like we need to prove everything, including our very humanity, but also internalizing or reinforcing what we do know about ourselves, our truth, our ancestral and communal truth, my individual truth that is rooted in ancestry and divine truth and all that goodness, so that I'm well prepared in that space, that when whiteness shows up, I am very confident to pause.
And
To
literate.
pause.
And literate.
Mhm,
This is the thing. I
mhm,
censor white people way too much, and I mean, there are white people who are my clients who are probably watching this. I censor y'all way too much. That's
mhm,
just I will speak, regardless of having in company. And even like the idea of racial literacy as a term I use all the time, being focused on white people and white
mhm.
adjacent people. Where the hell is our racial literacy? And I
Right.
actually, if you check my Twitter, and we've had conversations about this, we need
Check white Twitter.
we need white
Otherwise known as Twitter.
whiteness literacy. And I'm telling you, if there was a boot camp on whiteness literacy, if we could articulate these dynamics for ourselves, I feel like that's for me, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
way that
yeah.
I operate and how my defenses work, like psychological defenses, that those
Mhm,
pauses for me are me like
mhm,
rolling through the Rolodex. How did whiteness
mhm,
just show up in this
mhm,
moment, right?
mhm.
How am I going to
100%.
name this? Give some language to it, and then
Yeah.
ooh, like let my like blood pressure and heart rate slow down, because it's just whiteness, y'all.
Yes.
It's just whiteness.
Yeah.
It's here, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like if it was
Yeah.
like a spider and I had like a fear of spiders, like the
Yeah.
exposure therapy would be like looking at the spider, acknowledging the spider is there, and then processing the reaction to the spider, but maybe not
Yeah.
running away, right? And I feel like for
Yeah.
white people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whiteness when it shows up, that kind of Rolodex for me has been really useful. That does not separate
Yeah.
from the emotional reaction to it, but when I'm in
Yeah.
community with,
Yeah.
I can kind of process those feelings there with some cuss words.
Yeah.
but but we need literacy, and I don't know where there's like a literacy
Yes.
for us. A lot of it is
Yeah.
very white centered, and I'm complicit in that. So
Yeah. No, but you know what? I was looking, I ran up earlier because now I've lost my book. I'll find it, but I recently have you read Resma Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands? I've been talking about it on Twitter.
I
My
started
grandma, have you? No, yes, no?
I started it, but he had too high expectations. He wanted me to pause and like do the exercises, and I was like, I don't have time for that. I have all these like deadlines.
I
So
have these things to do. But however, at whatever pace that we read it, it is glorious. I'm reading it with my sister on Twitter, Robin,
mm,
and we're just going literally page by page, and it's fine because it's so rich
mm,
that there is more than enough material to last you for as long as you need. And I'm
right,
saying that to say that um it makes a very powerful point, because I support literacy because it gives us language, and language is powerful, and it gives us like a tool to sort of analyze and synthesize what's happening, and therefore inform what we do next. But I love what he says. He says, oftentimes, though, we do over intellectualize these experiences, but at the end of the day, trauma is experienced, and certainly racial trauma is experienced in the body. It
Yes.
is truly an emotion. Like that person who gave that feedback to you experienced his
Mm-hmm.
shock or their shock. I don't know, we keep saying his because our experience of this type of feedback has been in the body of a white male, let's be honest. But their shock, their threats
Mm-hmm.
in the body. And then it comes out in some intellectualized format. But ultimately, it's in the body. So it
Mm-hmm.
lives in the seats, like you said, feelings. They're in the feelings. Yes, that is true. In their emotions, experienced in the body, and then processed through some intellectual sort of, mechanism in order to distance themselves and sort of so that they can maintain a sense of superiority in the situation when the whole time they were acting not like spiders in my analogies, actually like a toddler throwing a tantrum,
Girl, I have look.
like a toddler throwing a tantrum. All these behaviors to me just remind me of my 3-year-old Chimamanda when she doesn't get what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just like stamping, she's stamping and she's throwing a fit because she didn't get, vanilla, she got chocolate, she got strawberry instead of raspberry or whatever the drama is of the day.
Right.
Because we did not go our way, because the order of the world that I've been used to I'm feeling is under threat, because I'm feeling like something is gonna be taken away from me, because I'm feeling like I'm being told I'm a bad person. There's this whole pathology about white goodness and always being a good person and nice, and there's this whole like pathology that can be unpacked with that. But whatever it is, I'm feeling under threat, and I'm going to run into my trauma response, which is a tantrum. And that tantrum is going to show up in giving horrible evaluations, just acting like, incoherent. But I'm going to use really high level language so that nobody catches on quick that I've just said absolute nonsense. All
Mm-hmm.
these are just tantrums. And at the end of the day, like you were saying, is to just say, well, that's just a child having a tantrum. We need to be clear as Black people, who sit in history. We need to be able to differentiate when that tantrum shows up is a threat to like our life, like bodily harm, absolutely. And then we also differentiate where it's not, and it's literally, just tantruming. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, excuse me, it is really being able to verbalize, understand, unpack, and verbalize what's happening in my body in this moment. Am I truly under threat or not? What are the true, real consequences? And how do I take my power in this situation whereby I can actually take a pause and run through my Rolodex of whatever the language is to really analyze what's happening, take my own, I'm not in a position to respond at this moment. I will get back to you if I get back to you, is what is also implied, and sort of figure out, where in whatever my response, and the choice to not respond is also a choice, but
Mm-hmm.
that I would take, some control to make a choice in this moment that still maintains my dignity, my humanity, and my power, whatever that means. And for you in that moment, it could be to not respond, or it could be respond, but to name what you decide to name. It may be to bring in some help, to bring in someone else into the situation that will get them straight and get them gathered. It could be a plethora of choices, but I think it's just saying that in that moment, what we need to be clear as to what is the choice I have to take control and maintain my power, my dignity, and my humanity. And that also includes like taking a pause. We don't always have to have the answers. Sometimes people tweet things and they're like, this happened and I said this, and everyone's like, oh, snap. And it's like, I wish I had the words to say in the moment. Most of us, the vast majority of us, don't have the words to say in the moment. And that's okay. It's okay. Take a pause and you can just verbalize, now is not a good time to make a response. I will get back to you. And your mind, you can say, if I get back to you, and then just move on from there. So that's what I would that's sort of my takeaway from there. And to not feel bad if you don't have where that, like I said, most of us don't have. Why would we? Like, why would any human just have words just at a ready to be dehumanized and insulted at every turn. What kind of way is that to live? You shouldn't have words at the ready. That's not a joyful, abundant, amazing way to live, glorious way to live. So no, good for you that you don't have words to say at the moment. I really need to normalize that, because people feel bad sometimes when they read like these events that happen, like, man, I wish I could say this then, and I could. It's okay if you don't. Good for you. I'm so glad you don't have words to respond to being dehumanized. What kind of life is that? But in that moment, you can pause and get yourself gathered. And like you said, I love what you said, Dr. Isa, let them get uncomfortable and think for a little bit if what they allowed to come out of their mouth was even appropriate or not. And you will answer them at your time.
I agree. I think if I could go back, because there's something cathartic about rewriting how you might do things differently. I think so yes, literacy on our bodies as well, 100, and how things show up. So I can be transparent, stress sweat. So like I get in all these interactions, it's a very distinct type of stress reaction. It's like, Lord Jesus, I ran away from a bear. But I think what would have been another choice in retrospect would be, in response to that ridiculous comment, to acknowledge how it impacted me in that moment. And that, because that would have been humanizing for me, to say, wow, I didn't have the expectation that that would be the response to this piece of excellence that was offered to this organization. And the words that were used were an attack on not only the merit of the submission, but also me. And from a colleague, that's really painful and that really hurts. And I want to take a couple minutes in this rushed ass meeting to sit with that and then come back and give a response. And then not only would I be sitting with it, but they would be sitting with it too. And it would be my humanity in that moment, along with the words that were offered for the anonymous submission, because there was no like humanity connected in that moment. There was no like, oh wow, that was really tough that someone said that about your paper.
Right.
Very painful. The expectation was a white supremacist perfectionism of like professionalism, which is what I did in a very like robotic way. I offered a theory analysis of the comment, but I did not acknowledge its emotional impact on me. And that was a missed opportunity, I think, to demonstrate the very because the very nature of the paper was on white dominant culture. And the paper was on white dominant culture. And it was showing up in that moment in their silence. It was showing up in that moment in the expectations for my performance. So many layers. I'm with you. And that goes to the question we asked the audience, which basically is acknowledging what you offered. And I'm a full disclosure intellectualizer. I say that all the time. That's the way that I operate. It's my primary psychological defense is intellectualization. So I appreciate language. But Dr. Opara is bringing us home, right, to what we also have to be focused on, maybe even more, which is how things show up in our bodies. Like, what sensations do we feel, and what feelings do we have? And for me, if I was going to name sensations, definitely like the sweatiness, like the heart racing shows up for me, and like the tension it's like everywhere. Like there is no relaxing in these moments. And my emotions, most of all, is anger, but also sort of a thrill too, in a very weird it's like, what you're not gonna do is think that in this moment, and this is like maybe the competitiveness of white dominant. It's like, I got you. Like I can name you, right? And I can respond to you. I'm not gonna run. So it's sort of like the thrill of the anticipation of like I don't even know if I was like an animal, the kill, the anticipation of the kill in that moment. And I honestly think that that's an internalization of their aggression towards me. And then I'm manifesting that aggression in response to them. I'm not sure outside of this context that I would have that level of aggression. Maybe I would. But that's kind of the way that I formulate that, for myself. So yeah.
What I can respond to that, may I respond to what you just shared? So I want to go back a little bit to the humanization piece that you lifted up. I just want to lift up what I took away from what you're saying is this. My take on on that piece where you talk about how this impacted me. I I like what you said. It's for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's for me to recognize that, my feelings matter. My, there is an impact. This, what just happened, something happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's I, as a human, had a reaction and a response that is valid.
Right.
It's for me. It's not for me to expect them to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for, we are very clear that I don't want to say incapable, but they are very defunct in their ability to humanize us. I mean,
Because
we've seen it all the time.
because
Over
of their
and over.
socialization.
Yeah, they don't, right? They've been socialized, as you said, their racial socialization, just, I mean, at the root of all these systems of oppression is to dehumanize the other, right? Like, we just don't have the same feelings, we just don't have the same value, on and on. So me even saying that, well, this is how it affected her, my feeling, they, in, out, right? They get uncomfortable, then they center themselves and they start acting even more foolish. So I would not, for me, would not put value in. Now, one or two of them, and it probably will be a white woman, will be like, I'm so sorry, we didn't mean to. But the point, that is not, for me, that's not the goal when I choose to name the impact of this behavior, because they invariably, especially in medicine and healthcare and, academia, well, they immediately go into intent versus, and miss the whole impact. It's all about their intent, all about the intent. And I got an insight today by watching Lula. There's a documentary on Amazon Prime Video called Lula Money or something, Lula Rich, about the whole Lularoo. I don't know if you follow the Lularoo, like the leggings that there's a business of this white lady and her husband, I think in Utah, and they have these leggings and clothing business. It's an MLM, multi-level marketing slash pyramid scheme thing that was going on. But there was a scene where they were interviewing the husband, owner of this company, and where there was a lot of shady business practices that Ludaro, the company, got involved in. And so the according to the documentary, so allegedly, I don't know. And so the people under, the employees or participants, whatever they call them, the people that bought the clothing, the retailers or whatever, they had all this feedback like, yo, this is off, customer service, the product is defective, all this kind of stuff. So his response was, you know what, if you're not doing well in your business, that's not on us. We provide all the tools that you need. So we've done our part. So if our intent in doing a XYZ is not to produce this outcome. So therefore, if this outcome occurs, it's on you. And that was a piece that I hadn't really internalized in this conversation about impact versus intent. We talk about this all the time in this work, that your intent, like, who cares? The point of is, what is the impact of your actions, right? Like, there's this like pathologic dependency and commitment to, well, I didn't mean to hurt. I didn't mean to hurt. So I don't know why you feel hurt, because I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to, in a way, it somehow excuses or absolves me, from the harm. But the insight of that scene for me, which I got yesterday, was that, oh, another function of that mindset and behavior and attitude is that it not only absolves them of responsibility for the harm that has been experienced, but it places that responsibility on you. You are doing it to yourself. And that was a piece that I really hadn't like gotten in this whole conversation. I got that, well, they're trying to absolve themselves of responsibility on the harm. They're trying to say they're innocent. But what I didn't understand, the other insidiously, frankly, evil part of this sort of, hey, my intent, I don't know my intent piece, is that not only are they absolving themselves of responsibility, but they are placing the responsibility on you, that you are doing this harm to yourself. That's
Right.
another part of the racial gaslighting and, and functions of, white supremacy and anti-Black racism and intersectionality therein, because misogynoir, et cetera, ableism, and the rest of the business. So I'm saying all that to say that inside, of this piece of the us owning our humanity, and being clear about, I want to make clear that the impact of what is happening, whatever it might be, X, Y, and Z, this is how it's impacting me, is a way for us to own our own humanity and our own humanization. Is for us. It is not to expect necessarily differently from them. Now, if something different, if they do change their behavior, attitude, or mindset, great. But if they don't, we weren't expecting otherwise either. And we have just put it so that the record can show, and the nature can document a record that we stated that there was impact. We stated there was cause and effect. Let it be known, and we can move on.
Right. Which I mean, I if I could go back in time, that would be the intervention. And
Yeah,
absolutely moving forward, if we're talking about things to put into our toolbox, I think that is like an intervention for the long haul in whatever space. And I've heard it before from other people, naming what happened, acknowledging the impact is for me, it's not for you. It's healthy for me, it might be helpful to you, but you're not being centered in that intervention. Um,
correct.
right. So speaking of, so we talked about like what we do after. And there's this term I came across called numbing, and
Mm,
um came up in our conversation last time,
mm,
and talked about a bit of numbing. So there's three things that we could be thinking about here. So like, how are we engaging in self-care? How are we engaging in soul care? And how are we healing? And one of the things that we probably most of us do is the numbing piece. And numbing basically is where you're literally, what it sounds like, you're engaging in an activity that distances you from your experience.
mhm,
And we talk about things like doing the binges. So I know I was recently binging, and I haven't finished yet. Real Housewives of Potomac. That's been
mhm,
ways that I've been like, just like existing elsewhere, in the midst of multiple things going on. There's also like overconsumption of
mhm,
things, including like food and like drinks, edibles, whatever people do these days. Beyond that,
mhm,
I won't name. But a way of like creating some distance in between what we are feeling and thinking. And the thing here is like how much of our response to race-based stress should be numbing versus other things. And there anything that's too much is a problem, right? So
mhm.
I don't think I would support a no numbing policy in response to race-based stress, but definitely thinking about how much space numbing takes up versus other things, for me, is the core part of figuring out like what to do with this racial trauma. Because in the spirit of numbing, probably the primary thing I do is work. Like, there is never something not on the to-do list ever. And I don't really conceptualize overworking as numbing. I hadn't previously. But it was brought up by Candace Nicole Hargens. She's a Black psychologist who talks about racial trauma. And when she
Mhm.
said that, I was like, huh, yeah, that's probably a part of this whole, strong Black woman syndrome stuff that we talk about, like ways that we produce and produce and produce without resting.
Mm.
That is a part of the expectation of others, but also for ourselves might be a way to numb. So I don't know what you think about this. Like, what kind of numbing do you engage in, or just any thoughts um, on what I offered?
I know I'm with Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, Apple TV, uh, uh, HBO Max.
Oh
Let me,
yeah,
what else is on my phone? And I know
right,
I'm with food. We talked about this
right.
too. Um, and even though I'm enjoying some red wine, I don't do alcohol really, but this
Mm,
is a nice conversation to have some red wine. And
mhm.
very soon I'll be indulging
What's that?
cheesecake. So
Yeah,
cheesecake and red wine. One for my husband, one for me. No, I'm lying, both for me. Okay, so
but we'll get to other things. But like, come on, or share with the toddler.
so I agree. I agree with that. That is very true. Um, And I certainly talk, about that. I said, if you're dealing with obesity in our community, have you can't discuss anything. And I had this discussion in my research group, recently,
Mhm.
as they're talking about stress. They want to measure stress in the cohort. They want to measure different metrics. I'm like, you gotta have to talk about racial discrimination and using some racial discrimination scales, and asking about the experiences of racism. You cannot, talk about stress in a majority African American population and not bring up race and racism. Like, that's
What are you doing? That's your lens. That's your racist lens. There's no other way to articulate that.
there's no other way to articulate that. And the same thing, you can't talk about obesity without talking about racism, because a lot of times our eating disorders, okay, are linked to our ways of numbing, coping, trauma response, etc.
Mhm.
Period. You can't have that conversation, which is why we talk about, these white researchers in these spaces. Like, what are you doing? Or even Black researchers that haven't cultivated their competency and literacy around racial trauma. So this is why this conversation is very critical, not just for our personal, just like growth, development, and survival, and thriving, and abundance, and joy, but it translates to, the ways that inform our practice, our professional practice. You can't be a therapist and you're dealing with a Black woman, or a BIPOC person. You're not bringing up, racial and
Mhm.
intersectional oppression and violence. So it 100% informs the sometimes often self-destructive behaviors we participate in. And I know I do too, that I've participated in. And I mean, I laugh about these, but it's problematic. So then when you're talking about obesity and hypertension and stroke and heart disease and kidney disease, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can't have those conversations without talking about and lifestyle changes. Well, just eat differently and go jog around the block, without talking about, well, when you jog around the block and Karen sees you jogging and calls the police because they don't think that you belong in that neighborhood, are you going to jog around the block? We often talk about, because of where I practice, that, oh, it may not be safe. It may not be safe for people because of crime. Well, it may not also be safe in the suburbs, because Karen and Kevin out here calling people like, do you belong in this neighborhood? What's your ID and your key? So safety for us being so many different things. And so, yes, our behaviors will be expressed in these ways. And I like what you said about um not really adopting a no numbing policy. Well, yes, because I think that, some of these are important just to survive the moment. But I think that, numbing, it really should be temporary, a bridge to a permanent, healthy approach. And I think that over time, my prayer and trust and hope is that the numbing behaviors decrease,
Right.
right? So that and that's where the healing centeredness is key, right? That we grow stronger in these healing centered practices, so that we can engage in less and less in these numbing behavior. But you're right, in the short term, they are protected, because sometimes we don't have the equipment,
Mhm.
the tools and instruments to name and address and workshop our traumas and experiences. So in that moment, it helps us to survive. But they shouldn't be long lasting, and we should be participating in the healing practices, the self, soul, community care, and etc. To center healing in our lives, and so that they become now first nature, even in response to many of these experiences.
Yeah, it brings to mind a quote from Audre Lorde. I think she said self-care is like it's like a revolutionary something. Y'all don't kill me, but
Yeah, self-care is revolutionary.
it's true because we're caring for ourselves. I mean, the environment itself produces toxic stress. Like existing in a racist society produces toxic stress, and we're not meant to have cortisol surging through our bodies and our brains.
Chronically.
Heaven, like
Chronically and intergenerationally. Yeah.
so it's a lot. It's a lot to be.
A
I
lot.
was just thinking because I went to the hair store a few weeks ago, just minding my own business in the hair store. And for me, it was like, I'm taking a moment to do my hair. It needed to be done, y'all. It needs to be done again. But I was like, I'm taking a moment. I'm going to the hair store,
That's
walk
beautiful.
around, thank you, and do my thing. Why am I in this damn hair store? And I turn and look to my left, and it's an entire wall of bleaching products. And
Oh, yeah.
I've never noticed in all my years of going to the hair store that there was a section for bleaching products. And I was literally
Yeah.
standing there looking at it. And another like thing happened as I'm looking at it and pulling out my camera. The lady up front I think she thought I was going to steal something. I'm like, first of all, like, I got this. So I felt really weird, but I wanted to take a picture of it. Right? Just like look at it and get a sense of like, what is this? But for me, that was like, it turned what would have been like a nice moment of like doing something for myself into a reminder of how white supremacy, or at least perceived white supremacy, operates. So much so that there's lots of layers to this. The store, of course, is not owned by us, but there's a whole wall
Mm.
more white that I'm expected to be a consumer of. So I mean, assault's all over. So that definitely was a part of my day. But it sort of transitioned us to like, okay, well, what do we do in the
Yeah.
self-care realm? And a nice definition of self-care that I saw was like a focus on individual wellness.
Mm.
Um, and I, asked some people in the chat, what did they do? And I think, let me see, recently for me, I've stopped doing, this is like workaholic stuff, but I've stopped trying to have meetings in the evening for the most part.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
meetings on the weekends. And I have, this is probably like something I shouldn't say publicly, but like if I can't do it, I cancel and I reschedule. And it's just like I can't show up for you, especially on
Yeah,
Zoom.
yeah, yeah.
Or if I have a little bit, I'll show up, but I won't be on camera for like a meeting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Give me grace. But those are ways of like setting boundaries around like I can't be 100% Dr. Isom all the time. Like it's just not possible.
Yeah.
And then other things that fortunately I do have a 3.5-year-old who laughs like 99% of the time, except when she's crying because she hit me. But like I have to apologize to her. So except for those moments, she's laughing all the time, just living her best life. So
Yeah. I
her
love
and living her best life, and that's been really therapeutic for me. So those are some of the things, but I definitely could have a longer list. Again, a work in progress. But what about you? What's your individual wellness investment that you typically engage in?
this moment,
Mm,
right? This moment to be with you and to have just real conversations. Knowing who I am and what brings me joy, I love intimate,
mm,
complex conversations
mm,
with like-minded folks to talk about true, real things
mhm,
that you know, I've from being a child. And that was a huge part of my college experience was late nights with my girls, just talking
mm,
about
mhm.
life. And it wasn't about boys and stuff. It was just, because a lot of us were, rah rah black power. and we're from all areas of the diaspora. My major was African studies, so
Okay. Oh no, it froze.
that no
Oh, you're
surprise, I did pre-med and African studies in. Oh, I'm back. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, my
back.
internet is funky, wonky. But I majored in African studies and I did my pre med in parallel, but within me it was 100% intersectional. And just being with my folks who were also social sciences, humanities majors, because we love to talk and analyze and critically synthesize the data and information and
Yeah.
history, so that brings me joy. So this moment, that's why I can give off my 7 o'clock p.m. on Sunday to have these conversations. I love it. I love it. So I think it's really identifying what are the things that bring me joy. African music brings me joy. Afro diasporan music brings me joy. Reggae, hip hop, conscious hip hop with good beats, and whatever it is, our music brings me joy. So I love dancing, I love singing. I'm not terribly good, but I love just the act of expressing myself, all through song, for myself, not for other people, because other people would tell me to shut up, but
Right,
just
right.
for myself. So doing those things are important. I'm really exploring getting back into running and those activities that I let go years ago, when life got busy. But I have to recognize that if I don't have time to take care of myself, then I'm whatever I am making time for is not important. It's really not important, because I have to come first so that I can be around to do all those things. So I'm rearranging my whole sort of, calendar and what I'm choosing to give time to, so that I can get back to healthier eating that doesn't involve cheesecake, and going back to running. I used to be very athletic, very fit. So those are just some of the things that I do. And like you, I'm also a workaholic. So and I that's part of numbing too. I see that more and more recently. So I am making those choices. I mean, other than these moments, which I just are for me moments of joy, I choose not to do work on the weekends. And I am working on having a hard cutoff in the evenings during the week. Sometimes it's not possible. I make adjustments here and there, but at least the weekends, I do try to be more protective of it. So I do that, as well. And then, just be intentional about just being with my kids and enveloping myself in their spirit, while trying not to be pissed off at the same time, because they're destroying something.
Right.
So anyway, so that's it. Oh, and one more thing,
Mm-hmm.
deciding to, I'm not really, that's just how I'm made. I'm not really a shopping person or whatnot, but deciding to use money and spend it in getting somebody to clean my house, like those kind of things. Like, for so long I was just trying to do everything because that's what my mama did and I'm a superwoman. So really rejecting that, Black superwoman syndrome, and saying, okay, I don't buy hair, I don't do nails or anything. Nothing is wrong with those things. They just don't give me joy. You just do what gives you joy. If manicure pedicure give you joy, do it all the time. Doing your hair, do it all the time. That it doesn't really give me joy. I do those things occasionally, but I don't really derive joy from. But you know what I derive joy from? Coming home and my house is clean. Oh, and I didn't do it. Oh, orgasms. So
Not the
therefore,
orgasm.
look, it is equitable to one, or equal to one, rather, not equitable. So yes, I will pay someone for that. I will use hair and nail money and pay somebody to clean my house. So it's those boundaries, I think, little things like that I do for me.
Right. No, that's lovely. And I mean, yeah, I, yeah, invest in like a house cleaner.
Let
It's
me let
hard.
me take, let me take some cheesecake in recognition of that.
Hear you, hear you. The next phrase is soul care. And I will say, I mean, I struggle with this. The soul care piece I struggle with. And I'll say this, I'll out myself, y'all. Okay, are you ready? All
Yep.
right. Y'all, I am the A word. I am a non-believer, aka an atheist. And in the
Mhm.
Black community, what that means is that I am a minority in that I'm not a believer, I'm not a Christian. And a lot of times in these spaces where we're doing the soul care stuff, which is like the collective, spiritual based things that we do to kind of increase our resilience in the face of race-based stress, but also just be in a space, where our full humanity is recognized and there's reciprocity in that. A lot of those spaces are rooted in, Christianity,
Mhm.
references to God, the Lord, the scripture, and things of that nature. So for me, the spiritual piece has been a bit more of a challenge. I am a preacher's kid. Father's a pastor. Anyone who watches this from my family is going to be like, "What the A word?" But like, it's true. So it's more difficult for me to figure out. Well, what does soul care look like? I will say though, I do. I'm an introvert extrovert, so I don't always do people. But when I do people, it is nourishing to my soul. So like I have some like mentees I've connected with from social media. That's really cool to have those relationships. Just being useful to people in general, like supporting efforts can feel really good. Like people who are fundraising or doing efforts or other kind of work. And then I actually enjoy social media. Social media for me is a part of my soul care, not the toxic aspects, but the parts about connecting to others, especially those who are doing similar work, but also people who are just living similar lives, which is just trying to exist and get something out of this thing that we've been handed for however many years. But I'm, the spiritual thing, it's a struggle. Like it's a struggle for me. And I'm curious, if anyone else has a similar struggle. I know Dr. Opar, I think you're a believer. But the soul care thing, I think also similar to figuring out how to replace numbing behaviors is work on, moving forward, because there are ways of engaging in soul care that rooted in Christianity. However, much of my socialization around spirituality was in the Christian church, Southern Baptist. Still figuring that piece of it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the N word. I'm not an atheist.
What is that? Like, I don't know what that
is. So, but you know what, Dr. Isom, there are more Black atheists than we think. Like, they don't usually out themselves for the reasons you just said, because there's so many of believers, non-atheists, that and our culture is so strong around that I think a lot of Black atheists, I recently had one of my girlfriends confess, and they really do it like it's like, oh, girl, let me
just did it.
just
I know, it's real.
Under the desk, look behind. Is my grandma around? I don't believe. So, I think we need to, that's maybe another aspect in our community in terms of soul care, really owning all aspects of ourselves. I think accepting all aspects of ourselves. And really, when we talk about showing up in your authenticity and your authenticity, like all of that, even the parts that we know will not be necessarily approved by folks, but we think, I would say, because you might be surprised to get a lot of acceptance where you think that there isn't. I think there's a whole lot of Black atheists more than we think that they are. But I do think I love the word soul care or even spirituality, because you don't have to be a believer to have a spiritual belief or the spirituality, should I say. Maybe the word belief is antithetical to being an atheist, I don't know, but this sort of connection to something bigger to you, and that something bigger could be family, that something bigger could be community, it could be kindness, it could be a form of morality based in sort of a shared humanity, whatever. But I think the idea is, I love that, is to base upon whatever that belief system is, or connection system is, in that you engage in that in meaningful ways, like the ways that you describe. So, for me, to your point, and I'll tell you this, which is funny, and this is where sort of complexity comes into the shit situation. Yes, I do identify with a Christian belief, but understanding and owning all the complexities in Christianity, right? The way that it came on the horse of colonialism and white supremacy to our continent and all of that. I get that. Excuse me. So there is a lot of working through and workshopping that I do on a daily basis, right? And unpacking that I do in terms of Christianity, the Bible, and all the pieces there, and sort of extricating the man from the mission, should I put it that way, like the human pieces from the what I believe are the truly divine pieces. I think I do also something a lot of us diasporian and people from colonized context do, which is a little bit of a mixture, right, where there's this acceptance of like ancestry. Excuse me, pardon me if that was loud. All this wine and cheesecake. So
I can smell it over here, Dr. Opar. I can smell it over here. I'm not.
Girl, we're supposed to. I thought you were having yours too.
Oh no, mine is
so we can like share.
What is this? Herbal. What is this called? It's herbal something in the pineapple juice. Ooh. I don't remember the name. It's late, but
sounds delicious. And so I think that where I was saying, was that we do some kind of like admixture in a way where you still recognize, ancestors and some pieces of the traditional indigenous belief system while still lifting up Christ. And there's a whole that is like a whole conversation for another like
Mhm.
day. But I think still this idea of the divine and connecting to divine through prayer, through meditation, still living your life to the best of your ability that is in alignment with the principles and values that come through that belief system. um uh Fellowshipping with others who are like-minded, not just from the religious piece, but also who understand and are maybe grappling with these other pieces that I named, and
Mhm.
creating sort of our own, I don't want to say version, but in a way version of a Christian practice and a Christian walk that doesn't conflict,
Mhm.
that acknowledges the history,
Mhm.
and the historical context of the religious belief, but while still somehow excavating the valuable pieces that are meaningful and do add value to our lives on a day-to-day basis. So I think maybe those ways, yeah, that I would say. And then many of the things you said too, be building community with others that I've been so blessed to meet on social media, having these conversations virtually and in person, working with my mentees and other wonderful folks, who, again, where we can come together and share the truth
Mhm.
and help, with each other's healing and lifting up. So those would be those will be some ways for me.
Yeah, and then people are dropping stuff in the chat that I'm gonna have to go Google. Um,
Oh, what they say?
let's see. We got some burning of the sage. We have energy healers.
Hmm.
I'll have to check that out with you, Kamaria. We have Palo Santo, Joss paper, ancestral veneration. That's a big word,
Mhm,
Jonathan. Spiritual
mhm.
readings, blessing the body with Florida water,
With
dynamic.
Florida water.
Do we really want Florida water? I don't think so. I mean, Florida. My dad's from Florida, so I can touch. Yeah. Anyway, aromatherapy, oils, and tapping. I think meditation is the most accessible thing for me, or at
Mhm,
least has been so far. I don't have a meditation practice, but when I need it, it's very helpful. And I did post in the YouTube chat this Black Lives Matter meditation from the same psychologist.
mhm, mhm,
Incredible. I was in a hotel room in Nashville, Tennessee.
mhm,
I had just finished an 8-hour anti-racism training for an executive team in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was almost dead. And I put this thing on, and I was just like, I don't even know what happened because I usually don't get like emotional from listening to a meditation, but I was sobbing throughout the entire thing. The 17 minutes for me was like exactly what I needed in that time, and I was like,
mhm,
man, she just knew what to say. But the things that
mhm,
she was saying were just like basic things, like I
mhm,
matter, like I'm important, my feelings matter, I'm capable. Like, that's kind of sad. Like those things have to be said, but feel also so powerful when they are stated. And it just speaks to so many of the, white supremacist messages that we're receiving and also
exactly.
absorbing that say the opposite.
The
So
opposite. Exactly.
it
That's
was thug tears, but ooh, I was in this hotel room. I felt so embarrassed. I was like, that was a real cry, Jessica. What's going on with you? So it was
And
really
I know that you, even not being, even if one is, when you were talking, something just kind of came up for me. I was thinking about song and singing.
mm,
There's a reason I think that we in our culture as Black folks all over the diaspora, music and song plays such, and dance plays such a huge role in our lives. And I have had moments like what you're describing from just singing.
mm,
That,
mm,
like you said, I don't even know if it is the words she said, or if it is something behind the words, the way in which she said it, coupled with you going through what you went through all day. which in which case you're busy centering other people and doing very huge work, kind of bringing it back to, our title, anti-racism, when anti-racism is trauma. But when we do this anti-racism, you are pushing against a system that you did not build, you did not create. The whole entire thing is built on your dehumanization, that you are not human, you are nothing, you are less than animals. And you, the same you, are here standing against it and pushing. So you are contending with over and over and over and over and over and over again with the messages of you not being, human, not being worthy of anything good, because you are less than orangutans. You are less. That's what Charles Darwin said in Origin of Species, right? Which all, now folks are basing everything on, right? So you are less than, and you are the one pushing over and over again, continue with those messages while trying to change that same system. I mean, the work is beyond. I think even divine beings are like, why are they doing that? They shouldn't do that. Why? So no wonder, right? And then you come home after doing that for 8 hours, and then you're hearing your sister's voice, having to undo the impact, the subconscious, because in the moment your consciousness is fully alerted and activated to doing that work. Right. But your subconsciousness is receiving all the the message, the impact, right? So hearing your sister's voice with music, with all this background, bring those things to, now you have to repair the damage that you did,
that's a great experience. It was damage. I mean, it's like sitting there taking bullets. It really is.
You were taking straight up AR-15s. I don't know guns, so I don't even know what gun I just quoted, if it's a real gun, but let's pretend it is.
Right. It is.
Yeah, you just received straight up spiritual and emotional and psychological bullets, right? While still like, what a woman, come, and you're still like pushing, fighting for 8 straight hours. So that was a moment to now, be healed, have someone to wrap your spiritual wounds, apply salve, put medicine, remind, undo the damage. So yes, you will cry. I will cry. You do all kinds of things. So I think that, I think we underestimate the damage that happens during this work, and the need to go through whatever it is, whether it's song. And like I said, sometimes I just start singing, sometimes I don't even know the words I'm saying. I'm just singing, and it's like, it's a spiritual activity. It's not necessarily about the words necessarily. It's something I can't even describe that is happening. But what is going on is this, like, reaching into your subconscious to pull out those damaged spots, those areas of hurt and injury that now need massaging, a reminder of our dignity, our humanity, our glory, our humanity over and over again, because we've taken hits that we may not even be conscious of. Yeah. So it is so critical that we do post healing work. We shouldn't dismiss it because, we are tired or whatever, because even that fatigue is part of the damage that we have, the hits that we've taken in the work. And even if it's 5 minutes to do whatever, like you said, meditation, which is easily accessible, but even if it is just singing, just like, whatever it is, just whatever.
Do it again.
Oh, girl, listen. Let me get ready. Girl,
that's why I appreciate a good commute, because Lord, I mean, to me, it's like the most liberating thing ever is to just sing and dance in a space that feels, safe. secure, and we can't go to parties anymore, with our people. So it's the car. But speaking of a plan, I just shared this screen. I put this in the YouTube. Um,
Mhm.
because the thing about this resource is that the hashtag I've even titled the presentation after this, because the fact that it even has to be said, it just goes to show how much gaslighting we endure. Like, the fact that we have to assert
Mhm.
that racial trauma is real as a starting point is a symptom of that. But this is a
Mhm.
really cool outline, because it essentially asks you to list the things that you're already good at, the things that you're doing well, the things that work for you, and then prepare to monitor your response and to race-based stress. And not even in like a is it going to happen kind of way, in a it's going to happen tomorrow kind of way. Like, you are
Mhm.
proactive about it. And I appreciate with this particular resource its focus on crisis, because I've
Mhm.
been there. Like, I've had crisis moments in the past few weeks where I was like, I'm gonna quit my job, I'm gonna go on vacation for the next month, like, I just can't take it. And I just want to completely check out. And in those moments, it's a little bit different from the extreme crisis of not wanting to be on earth anymore, like having thoughts of suicide, and things of
Mhm.
that nature, which are also possible as well. We cannot discount that. But there are moments where we are in crisis that we can't even fully honor, because of the expectations coming from multiple sides. And I appreciate that this is calling us to not only naming that crisis is possible, but also planning for that.
Mhm.
Because Lord knows, and I say lots of things about the Lord because I'm a preacher's kid, but so now y'all understand. But Lord knows, like, we aren't even allowed to have a crisis. We're not allowed to have a crisis. And the only time we got permission, some of us, was last year with the murder of a Black person.
Right.
Some
Right.
people felt
Mhm.
like, oh, you can have a Black day now, but don't take too long. Make sure you come back and get your work done. Like, it's not really permission. So, and I don't think they have Black days anymore, because now we're back to normal in this country.
I think our Black days ran out.
I don't did I take one? I think I took one last year, but I really think,
Mm.
if we can, and I think this is like an accountability based thing too. Like, we should have
Mhm.
one, people in our lives should have one, and we should be asking each other about them.
Mhm.
That's the way of like that community care, soul care, thing that we were referencing, that we shouldn't be walking into these places without a plan.
Mhm.
Supporting each other and developing our plan. So I wanted to amplify that. Have you seen the plan before? I know I tweeted like a million times as if it's mine, but it's not, y'all. It's Boston College. Have you seen the plan before?
This racism recovery plan steps, I have seen it before, but I have not read it in depth. I'm just aware of its existence. And there's another one that I'm familiar with as well, which I need to look up. But yeah, no, I love it, and I agree with you. I love that they're like, okay, you got a plan. I mean, all this is sad that we have to do when you really think about it, but in the spirit of being realistic, it's important, because then it also minimizes those moments of caught in the headlights moments, right? Where when it happens, you're like, exactly what you said, the dopamine rush, almost like, ooh, I see you, whiteness, I see you, come through, whiteness, I gotcha. And you have the words and you have the plan in place. So yes, I love that. The plan is just like, look, Sib, it's gonna happen. What are you gonna do when it happens? And also the post crisis planning. How are you gonna come back from that?
Right.
I love that piece as well.
Right. And if you look in the literature, which we're not going to be super nerdy, but all of the like racial trauma stuff talks about resistance as a form of your healing. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, the starting point is that you are prepared to resist, which is where the self-care stuff comes in, and the soul care too, because you want to be in community. But the workaholic stuff, a lot of the work I am doing is around resistance. So in a way, it's sort of like there needs to be like a toning down of how much work there is, but it's very much like soul nourishing at least try with the power that
Mhm.
we have, and leverage
Mhm.
what we have to make things different. So for people who are wondering where that piece of things fits in, resistance is a form of us doing this work for ourselves, and
Yes.
for because someone said to me earlier today, this is really sobering, but they said the work that you're doing right now might not be recognized until until posthumously, after I'm
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
And I was like, oof, that was a sister. But like the fact that that's, that's what we're up against, that's sobering. But at the same time, it's like, well, there's going to be something that I've given to the community from the
Yeah.
sacrifice I'm making. But at the same time, I don't want to be so self-sacrificial that I'm, not living as long as I'm supposed to live. So there's a balance there too. But I love a good resistance. It's like, I
Me
mean,
too. I
um,
love it. I love it. I love it. And but it's important to kind of stay there for like a second,
yeah,
because that's part of where people struggle. Like we get into this anti-racist, anti-oppression work, this justice work for exactly what you said. Because
mhm,
for many of us, it's like, wait, is there another way to be? I,
right,
this is that's my job. I'm supposed to be part of making this world better for my people, for my children, my parents, my siblings, my community, me. And so like this is what brings us in here. So to your point, like for me, I agree, like my work in this space is part of my healing actually. However, it is finding that, and I use the term balance very, very loosely because I don't know that this is a thing that exists, to be honest with you. I think there's a myth of balance.
mhm,
But I would say that how can we integrate it in a meaningful way so that we are still, you know, prioritizing health? We're not compromising true priorities, which is our health, our wellness, our joy, and our abundance, right? And I think that's really the key. So, what are the practices I need to put in place to ensure that I am not compromising my wellness, my health, my joy and my abundance, and that of course, my family, and of course, by extension, my community
right,
ultimately.
right.
And how am I not shortening my telomeres so that I'm here for my 150 years, which I have decided that's about how
That's a
long I will.
long time. I might be tired of this
There's
world.
too much. Look, do you know how many versions of cheesecake exist? There's too much.
You might have cheese.
It's
I think I've seen this in a movie where like they have this tiny little thing that's like this big, the size of a mitt, but it explodes in your mouth like the flavor of eating the food. That might be the new diet food, where you get a capsule and you could taste like a whole meal. Maybe it was like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
probably
I would stay around for that so I could like enjoy without the calories. But
without the calories. No, I would eat that and be like, so where's the rest of it? Um,
that's the technology. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate y'all. There people are definitely active in the chat offering things, including experiences that are, obviously racial trauma, but there's a lot of wisdom there. And I know I myself, I'm going to go back and look into some of this stuff because as a psychiatrist, I've been, trained as a Western psychiatrist, which basically means they exclude and devalue, alternative ways of healing. And by they, I mean the institution. So there's a lot of other types of healing out there that I've seen. Like shout out to Kamaria Wells, who does like art-based therapy, and we'll be talking. But I'm very curious to like do some more Googling and see like what other things are out there to find, to add to the toolbox outside of just traditional individual one-on-one therapy, which is a very Western intervention and has its limitations that most of the therapists are, white, and don't have that lived experience. So this is good. This is
what are
really
some of the things? What are some of the things that you're seeing in the chat? I cannot access the chat right now.
yeah.
So unless I
So one
go, do I need to go into
um
let me see.
so one thing Gabrielle offered was soul care involves learning from younger folks, which is also a very accessible thing to do.
Mhm.
Young people. I have like nieces and nephews, but I don't have the same connections I had earlier in my training. But I mean, I'm not gonna. Some of the words I mentioned earlier were dynamic meditation, ancestral veneration. I don't know what veneration means, but I think it's sort of speaking to some of the meditations I've listened to where we're honoring our ancestors and channeling them in ways that help us to be resilient, and access healing. And I don't know, I think Reiki is a form of energy healing. If I'm wrong about
Break.
that, Reiki,
Like
please
this.
refuge, but I don't have the same connections I had earlier in my training. But I mean, I'm not gonna. When you're looking, you have some of the words I mentioned earlier were dynamic meditation, ancestral. There you go. So there's some stuff there. There's another app that I love that they introduced me to a little bit of this stuff. It's called Liberate Meditation. And on that particular app, I heard the meditation folks talking about things that were again like unfamiliar, but just just very soothing. So Liberate
Mm.
Meditation was another space where I was introduced to some of that content. I also have a whole book on liberation healing that I haven't had the time to read, but I imagine there's some stuff in there too, like liberation psychology, just a different way of approaching how we think about it. So, oh, someone said, oh yeah, okay. I don't know if I'll say that one, but I see. Oh my
We're
god,
talking
I'm
about
not gonna say that one.
microdosing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The cheesecake thing. But yeah, yeah, I think so this is part two. We, we're gonna post the recording so it'll be available for everyone. And we talked about, coming back and doing this on a recurring basis. And it'll be very dynamic with how it is structured, including potentially inviting people on to chat about their work and offer their expertise in this space. But for anyone who's wondering, like, oh, are you going to talk about this or will you incorporate that? Feel free to comment in the chat area and we'll take a look and we can figure it out. But um, we also are not about to be here for 2 hours and 15 minutes because we have cheesecake to eat. I know I have deadlines that I have to work on and some reality TV to watch. So we're gonna close. And I always tell people I am not ceremonial, so I always let everybody else close. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Dr. Opara to close us out before we end the broadcast.
So I'm gonna close out with something that came up in my spirit as we're talking.
Mhm.
And we talked about, ways, and I was just looking through the comments, and I love Jonathan. Jonathan, I love you and just everything you bring to spaces. And he was talking about song and ancestry. So this is a song in my language of Igbo.
Mhm.
And y'all, I'm not a singer. This is not about my voice.
Yes, it is.
And y'all may not you may not understand the words, but I, just kind of, receive it. I would love for you to share in the chat how you received it and how, just how you received it, what came up, what didn't, and I'll translate at the end.
Mm.
Ile n'anya n'ihu, ile n'anya n'azụ, ile n'anya kekpe, ile n'anya karị. Ịbụ onye Chukwu, anyị ga-ahụ ihe ga-eme wejawa Chineke ma. 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 Ile n'anya n'ihu, ile n'anya n'azụ, ile n'anya kekpe, ile n'anya karị. Ịbụ onye Chukwu, anyị ga-ahụ onye ga-eme wejawa Chineke ma. Anyị ga-ahụ ihe ga-eme wejawa Chineke. Asị m anyị ga-ahụ anyị ga-ahụ wejawa Chineke ma. Anyị ga-ahụ wejawa Chineke ma. Anyị ga-ahụ wejawa Chineke ma. It means if I look to the right, I look to the left, look to the, actually means if I look to the front, look to the back, look to the left, look to the right, and we'll gather what we will take to God and present ourselves well. Rough translation, rough translation. And you can apply that in a variety of circumstances about and translate that in a variety of ways. I'll just leave it like that. I'm interested to know how you translate that in your given circumstances, because it can mean so many different things. How do we look around and what we take to present ourselves to the divine in a well? So that's for you to just take and use and translate and apply as you see fit. So with that, I will end with my name, Ijoma. Travel well. Good night.